and welcome everybody to our discussion today. My name is David Girardi. I'm the VP of Revenue Optimization here at Forma. And I'm really excited to introduce you to our panel today. So, with the new year upon us, I know everyone's excited by the new year and starting off on the right foot. And so we're going to be discussing today how RevOps plays a role in contributing to a successful year in the sales space. And so the four industry leaders I have for you today, Esther Friend, Olga Treskova, Kwok Tran, and as well as our CEO at Forma here, Nabil Al-Azam. And they're going to start by giving a brief introduction, and then we will jump into four key priorities in terms of the RevOps space, and the guests will be able to share their perspectives on each one. And so with that, Esther, I'll pick on you first to give your introduction.
Sure. Esther Friend here. And most recently, I was at Five9 as VP of Sales Efficiency and Transformation, but I'm actually making a move. And in January, I'll be starting at Udemy. Udemy is a leading learning platform and skills marketplace. So we'll be starting there as the VP of Revenue Operations. And I'm based in Denver, Colorado.
Excellent. And Olga, can I
Sure.
pass it to you?
My name is Olga Treskova. I run revenue operations at a company called Birdeye, and I oversee marketing, sales, and customer success operations. I've been in operations, feels like all my life, since 2007, and I'm based in Los Angeles, California.
Kwok?
Thanks, David. My name is Kwok Tran. I am the VP of Revenue Operations at Instructure. I have over 20 years of experience in tech space. A lot of great companies that I've worked for: Autodesk, AWS, Zendesk, Okta. I'm currently at Instructure, where we are a LMS company that sells a great product called Canvas. If you're aware of that, I am currently in Miami, but actually based out of California.
Yeah, thanks. And Nabil?
Hi, everyone. Nabil Al-Azam, founder and CEO of Forma AI. My career started in Salesforce effectiveness consulting prior to founding Forma, and so working alongside revenue operations leaders like the panelists here to help them support bringing their strategies to life, and led to me founding Forma to solve some of the challenges and problems that I saw firsthand. Super excited to dive in today.
Great. And with that, let's jump into the discussion. So the first topic that we have is that I asked each of our panelists today to come prepared to share one top priority that their team is going to be focusing on to improve sales in the new year. And so everyone's going to go over what that priority is, why it's a priority for them, and then how they'll go about addressing it. And so with that, I'll start with Kwok yourself to introduce your priority.
I think that our top priority is really to help the company grow, and what we're trying to do is really provide access to data and clarity around metrics. We're evolving kind of our go-to-market as we have recent acquisitions. So what we're trying to do is actually minimize change, provide access to data, and really provide single sources of truth to the business. I think one of the things that we challenge with, especially when we look at data, is just there's different spreadsheets going around, and we just want to kind of minimize all of that and just really focus on what that source of truth is. We're also looking at kind of being able to tell the what and why more clearly, what's happening and why is it happening. And then we're evolving to kind of forecasting and what is likely to happen and how we can actually help improve those performances. So what, why, and predictive analytics is our focus for 25.
Interesting. And Olga, maybe you can go next for your priority.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree with Kwok. That is like an all-time RevOps priority, right? We always need to support the goals and growth, and of course identifying the truthful data, the data that we can trust, and marching towards that single source of truth is, I feel like it's always as a top priority. What I have been discovering though in this past year is, as RevOps was founded as a function to break down silos. But oftentimes what I keep discovering is that we create silos within ops teams, right? We create silos within the teams that support the go-to-market. So my priority, one of the priorities that I'm going to be focusing on is to break down silos between RevOps and enablement, and use enablement as this accelerator for the sales performance. As RevOps, we roll out new processes or we optimize processes, we roll out new tools, we make fixes to the sales process. It is so important to deliver that timely to our sales teams. And the way I'll be solving for that is, of course, partnering with the enablement team and investing in integrated tools, right? That would allow probably, you know, micro learning, offer bite-sized learning materials, would plug into our CRM nicely, suggest content that might be helpful for a salesperson in different stages of the opportunities, and just over communicating in terms of any changes that we're making to the systems or the processes, and staying on top of that.
And Olga, if I could follow up, when you were mentioning in terms of, you know, this source of truth, do you think the problem is it that truth is spread over multiple different tools or software programs or sources, or is it the actual accuracy of the data in maybe a single source?
It's both, right? Remember a couple years ago, I think we all went shopping and bought pretty much every shiny object out there. Now I think we're downgrading, and the motion is on reducing the number of tools and doing more with less, but we still operate in a lot of systems, right? There's a lot of system flowing around, especially if you do 360 RevOps. If you have marketing, sales, customer success operations, you're probably operating in at least like 10 different systems that do spit out some sort of data. So it's about identifying the source of truth for different types of data, right? So CRM is your sales motion, probably, right? There's marketing automation platform that marketing is going to be probably focused on, right? So it's about identifying the tools, and then what types of KPIs, what data points you're gathering from each tool. And then again, aligning that, hey, this is what we trust, right? With the sales leaders, that's one of the biggest priorities and motions always for RevOps, is to bring all of the executives to that table and agree on, like, hey, for finance data, we use the CRP system. For sales process, we use Salesforce or CRM platform, right? For marketing campaign performance, there's a marketing application tool. So I think it's always both, and it's balancing, you know, the tools, the accuracy of data, and also ensuring that you plug the right KPIs into the right sources.
Yeah, you never want to go into a meeting and spend the first 15 minutes agreeing on what the data is. Rather have this discussion on how to impact that performance.
And we've all been through that, right? We've all been through that. So also identifying the owner of the data, right? You might have a data scientist or BI team or analytics team, or revenue operations would own your analytics. So aligning beforehand on who is the ultimate owner of producing the analysis from what kind of sources is also a key component here.
You know, it's interesting because I feel like what I see as a common issue sometimes is, as a RevOps team, you know which system is supposed to be the source of truth for what data, but then you have these like side projects or whatever side initiatives that are done where people come with insights or results, and they're not necessarily using the same system of record that we have set. And so, you know, that's getting that to be well understood across the organization is sometimes a common pain point.
Absolutely. And something that we worked on, Abel, is a data dictionary, right? Putting together a data dictionary where you actually outline, put a definition of what is ACV, what is a meeting set, you know, because in every company can be different. Pipeline is different in every company. So aligning first in definitions, and in that data dictionary, I'm also pointing what is the source of truth for that KPI.
And Esther, how about yourself? Do the points raised by Olga and Kwok resonate with you as well?
Yeah, so definitely hard to hold back from commenting on lots of those points. I think, you know, in many environments I've gone in, we've had to kind of clean up, you know, especially if you've been an early adopter of Salesforce and you have Salesforce reports, you can end up with people referencing, old reports and thinking they've got the source of truth because it's in Salesforce and because they might even know the person that created it and they think, oh, that person's an expert, but it's referencing, an old schema, for example. So that's something that I found super helpful in the past, is doing some cleanup so that you don't have that those old reports out there that people think, yay, I've got this great report. And then you tell them, and actually that's, that's not what you need. So that's definitely a tip, is to definitely take time to go and do some cleanup and move some of those things that people might otherwise be accessing and think that they have good data. As far as my priorities, so as I mentioned, I'm starting at Udemy, and similar to Olga's structure, I also have the marketing operations under my umbrella, go-to-market operations, sales operations. And so one of my big areas of focus is going to be around go-to-market operational cadence and operational rigor. And I think some of it will be around some of these things we just talked about, around making sure we have alignment and agreement on which metrics we're referencing, which are the source of truth dashboards. I've definitely seen a lot of success in the past, especially with marketing, on having shared dashboards for the key KPIs, that we're leveraging the same filters, the same tables. In past lives, I've used things like Domo or Tableau for that. But that could be super helpful, is to actually do that as a project, with the marketing team, so that everybody's got the same metrics and so that you don't have these different narratives happening. But I would say that's kind of job number one, is really making sure we have the right structure in place, the right meetings, and that we're focused on answering the right questions so that everybody's aligned.
Great. With that, I think let's move into the second topic that I have, and I want to specifically focus on sales incentives for this. Again, January's upcoming, January, February, big kickoff time for a lot of companies in terms of their sales forces rolling out new comp plans. Thinking about the upcoming couple of months, I wanted to ask the panel, do you have any tips to successfully launch your comp plan in terms of not just communication, but even just, can you launch it on time? Is it going to be communicated with the kickoff meeting? Is it going to be April and we're still deciding on what quotas are going to be set? So maybe I'll start kind of in reverse order here. Maybe Esther, you can start to weigh in, but what does a successful comp plan launch look like?
Yeah, so I think this generated some interesting discussion when we talked about this internally, prepping yesterday for this call, of like different points of view. And I think sometimes it depends on the type of changes that are happening with your comp plan as to whether you would want to use the SKO kind of event as a platform to kick that off. I think there was consensus that if you're rolling out new quotas and that might be something contentious, that might not be the right place to focus on it, versus like comp plan things that are directly addressing feedback points that reps have had, like around misalignment with channels or things like that, where you're actually coming back to them with a big win to share, that you can launch that at SKO. That can create really good buzz. It's probably one of the best times you have, just from an awareness standpoint, where everybody's paying attention. Since everybody's there in person, and you have a chance to really also, I guess, informally talk about it after you've formally announced it. I think it can be a really good way to generate momentum. So I'd say, if it's something really positive that's based on previous feedback, where you're coming back to do something really transformational based on the feedback you've had, I think SKO is a great place to roll it out. But I think, some of the other things that I think about from a success standpoint are, people oftentimes want to really understand the nitty-gritty. Like, okay, I'm an enterprise rep, I sell this many deals, my average ACV is blah, blah, blah. Like, what does this plan mean in terms of tangible, like, examples? I think that can be super helpful, and to have examples that are segment specific. And even, if you have international people, oftentimes their deal size is different. So having examples that are relevant for your audience that you can take offline as kind of a follow-up, where they can see, this is how I can actually, in the day in the life, make this work for me, so that they're buying into it. Obviously the whole point of compensation plans is to motivate people. So if we're not communicating in a way that they feel motivated by it, then we're definitely not leveraging that tool. So those are some things I think.
Those are all great points. Yeah. Olga, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, we're aiming to launch our comp plans and the ROE by January 2nd, right? So we're going to have a SKO later into Q1, but this is what we're marching towards. and working with our partners in finance and comp planning and legal to put together a packet. That's an annual event, right? So a comp plan, also the rules of engagement document is being shared with all of the customer facing roles, right? On January 2nd. Yes, so that they have time to digest, and then we can cover some of the open questions at SKO. I 100% agree with Esther, providing examples and providing some sort of calculators on how you get to your quota. Also providing some historical trends is super helpful when you're delivering that to sales. Again, as with any probably RevOps project or sales ops project, over communicating and staying on top, usually aligning with sales leaders before we roll this out. So we go through all of the nuances with sales leaders and sales managers. They would be the ones to actually communicate it to their teams. And then we would host something like office hours where we can answer questions on exactly how it works, what are the mechanics of how it works in terms of calculating.
January 2nd is certainly a very, very early, but obviously great to be able to start that early and get everything in the reps' hands to start the new year. I guess, Kwok, how about yourself? Can you one up January 2nd, January 1st?
Definitely not going to one up January 2nd. We have dim the lights here at Instructure, so but our target is January 13th. Our kickoff is that week, so it's right before kickoff. I'll echo a lot of what Esther and Olga said. I think the part of that also is starting early. So one of the things that we did this year was we started very early gathering that feedback and trying to incorporate kind of the data behind why we would make some of these changes. The other one, as we kind of look at incentives across go-to-market, just making sure that we have comp plans that are aligned across roles as well. So incorporating renewals in not just the renewal managers or the CSMs, but also with the AEs as well, and sales leadership, making sure that pipe gen is a shared target across, and making sure that we don't have conflicts in the comp plan of one another. I think those are some examples of things that I've seen work well. Olga and Esther already mentioned it, but examples. Another thing that I like to do is look at what would a salesperson have made in 24 and what would they have made in 25? What are the changes? And salespeople are going to go in and try to pick apart your comp plan and optimize for their own sales. So this is a deal that would have paid this much this year. This is a deal that would have paid differently for next year is another thing that I like to do. And then I think it was already mentioned, but definitely hold sales managers and leaders accountable to the communication of these plans, but be there to assist in that communication, right? I'm not sure if I like to announce comp plans at SKO. There might be a lot of questions there. I'd rather do it in smaller groups and then kind of a big one on stage after people kind of had time to digest. Right. The shock factor might be a little too big sometimes, depending on what your comp plan changes are, right?
Yeah, I mean it's basically like a narrative that at the end of the day, that's kind of the art component of any incentive rollout is what's your story. And I think Esther's point earlier is it can be a positive, it can be addressing feedback, in which case, and if it's clear enough that it's obviously a win for everyone, then it might be the morale boost that you want at SKO. But there's no perfect analogy. There's no perfect way to do it. You have to think about the implications of what you're rolling out. But one thing that I've seen work very well, it's hard to execute, not just like a 101 or office hours, but at the kind of SKO, to sit down with reps and kind of almost do like an account planning tied to their comp plan. So it's like, let us help you understand exactly how you're going to get to your number and how you're going to maximize your earnings. So it's like, let us help you game the plan, because an ideal plan, when gamed, produces the outcomes that you want. But I mean, yeah, obviously the sooner you get the plans rolled out, in theory, the faster you can get the kind of ambiguity out of the way and have the team kind of oriented to wherever you want to take them. So.
And that's an extra level, Nabil, like what you're saying, right? Actually mapping it out for them and showing them the path to their quota, right? Doing the account planning, and then there's Things like account scoring and tiering and all of that comes into play. So it's like becomes a true true RevOps exercise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's sorry. Just the
No,
one
no.
thing to add to Clark on that is like, I think sales comp, when you think about, okay, the plan design, the payout curve design, like that's sales comp, right? And there's a lot of financial modeling that needs to be done there. I think RevOps, and if you think about the complexity of comp, it's sales attribution. Who gets credit for what deal? And there's so many business rules and business like logic where we think about the sales process and how it translates into who gets credit, that I think RevOps kind of supports significantly on helping like the team understand them. And the better clarity you have there, the better ownership of their number that we typically see within the sales force. So
Yeah,
Sometimes
Olga
I
mentioned
think
it.
that
Setting the
sorry.
ROE with it, right? Setting the ROE with it explains kind of that what you're talking about.
And sometimes I think a world would be a better place without attribution, you guys. Like it's messes up a lot of processes. What I would also add is I think from planning perspective, RevOps and alignment with finance on rolling out incentives is plan for diversions, right? Like plan for things like splits, plan for things like spiffs. There's usually some seasonality when it comes to spiffs. There's usually some deal sizes or segmentations when it comes to splits, right? There can be some account families or acquisitions where you have to split between your new business rep and existing business rep. So plan for that. And this is what we also like to put in our ROE document. That's why we send it along with a comp plan. So it's not just the math, it's not just the plan, but also the rules around those plans.
And I wanted to pick up specifically what Olga brought up in terms of spiff, and the answer doesn't have to be this, but you guys have all elaborated on the amount of rigor and work that your teams are doing ahead of rolling out the plans. I wanted to follow up and ask you, okay, now let's pretend that it's rolled out. How are you guys monitoring things through the year from a RevOps perspective to figure out, okay, things are starting to go off the rails. This is why, and we need to intervene. And kind of how would you intervene? What would your team suggest? So kind of like, what are you looking at, and then what do you recommend enabling at that point?
I can go first. I mean, I think what I've seen done successfully is when you have monthly business reviews, you're able to have access to data on a more frequent basis instead of doing it on a quarterly basis. I think it's a little bit too late. What I'd like to do is actually within that MBR process, identify some things that you want to tweak and change, and then run the spiff for the remainder of the quarter, right, or the remainder of the year, depending on what it is. An example is if you're seeing that linearity is not there for the first 2 quarters, for Q3, you can run a linearity spiff on month 1 and try to pull things forward. I think the difficult part though is, are you doing something? Are you paying for something that would have happened already? So it's really kind of that balance of like how much impact and ROI do you get from that spiff, and being able to have some exceptions or have some logic in place that we're not going to pay for anything that would have occurred naturally. So it's just kind of that delicate balance. But I would definitely use data on the monthly business reviews to highlight areas that we actually want to kind of make some change and impact to.
So yeah, I think that's a great point. I feel like, yeah, quarterly is definitely a goal for most organizations, but monthly is certainly something that would be a lot more effective. I guess in terms of even spiffs, is that I guess a question for the group, is that kind of a overplayed kind of method to change the comp plan? Or I mean, do sales teams become spiffed out, as in it's become expected, it's part of the plan, and therefore it's not really a tool in our toolbox to use?
I do. I think it depends on the spiff, and I think it depends on the communication of the spiff and the buy-in of the leadership team, right? I think not all spiffs are equal, and if you do a spiff every quarter, is that still a spiff, or is that just part of your comp plan? So I think it all kind of depends on what you're doing. But I mean, you're trying to drive behavior change with the spiff, right? So it can't be long; it has to be short. It has to be time bound. There's some criteria that I would probably set as a best practice, but I've definitely seen spiffs where we've had zero incremental movement, and that's a design change that we need to take moving forward. And we learn from some of our mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think my experience with spiffs has been that it's very reactive, right? And I hate being reactive. It very rarely works when you try to dig yourself out of a hole and you're in this urgent motion to fix it somehow, right? So planning your sort of spiffs in advance, analyzing your past historical periods, your previous years, right? And to when you launched it and what actually worked, for what types of deals, what types of segments, et cetera, and sort of like having them in your back pocket in advance. And then again, watching behavior and not rolling it out like 2 weeks until the end of the quarter to try to save it, right? But also watching, analyzing, and being on top of that.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's interesting I guess we had a little bit of this discussion yesterday. It's like ideally the spiffs are well thought out in advance and they're trigger based, right? So it's like if we know that this is not being accomplished, you kind of engage that mechanism, which you've pre-thought through, you've well analyzed. And another point that you brought up around like you sometimes roll something out and then it was going to happen regardless. And now what's the ROI of that spend? And I think the ideal situation and kind of bringing sales process and connecting it, and this is kind of the RevOps side, is like bringing the data from sales process and sales activity into however, all the sales enablement, including sales comp, together enables you to do things like, if we're going to roll out the spiff, this is the prediction that we're making for the sales behavior X that should increase if we roll this out. And then very quickly, you can kind of see the ROI on, did we roll this out? We saw a change and that resulted, or we didn't. And now it's a lesson learned in terms of like doing that retro so that to never, ever do that again and not waste the company's money. But it's easier said than done because you have to bring these complex data systems together and do so quickly. So it definitely can't be reactive to this point.
Great. So with the time left, I wanted to keep moving on in our discussion topic. So I'm going to move towards something around sales analytics and speak specifically because we know that RevOps is such a key and crucial strategic advisor to the CRO and the sales leadership. And obviously using sales analytics to drive a lot of that decision making. And so in terms of your experience, I want to ask the panel, what advice would you have for an organization that would probably self-assess themselves as less mature in terms of sales analytics? And how could they use what they have at their fingertips to better achieve that status as strategic advisor? Maybe Esther, I can start with yourself on this one.
Yeah, I think in terms of the maturity assessment, I think having defined source of truth, I think Olga spoke to the data dictionary earlier, I think is a great way to do that. I think, one thing that I've found really successful is using the sales enablement platform as a place to store information for leaders by segment, by their region, that they can access, that they know these are the places to go get these metrics. It would be great if everything was in one system. But unfortunately, what I've seen is that sometimes we'll have specific dashboards that are in Salesforce that the leaders like to have those in that place because they're very actionable with their team and they can click through easily. Whereas there might be more of kind of a quarterly view that's quarter over quarter, year over year type view that's in a platform like Domo or Tableau. But you can have all of that available on an information page so that people know exactly where to go for that, and curating that regularly so it's the most accurate place for everybody to know this is where I get this data. But I think also making sure that there's a source of truth that everybody from across regions is using, that people at a leadership level down to the granular rep level can go and see all of those metrics where they're all cohesive and it's the same definition, just different slices, I think is something that's super important, because I think that we waste so much time when people have different views of the metrics. And you kind of cited this earlier of this example of people thinking they have something that's validated. You might have your channels team that's got some report that just does not align at all with how you're doing things. So I think the communication, making sure each of the teams that's part of the go-to-market, operations team, that everybody has access to the metrics and that they know this is where to get the source of truth data.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, that's a great point. You don't need some intense machine learning algorithm to just make sure that people understand the basics of what is out there and where they get data, what it actually means. Any other thoughts from the group, Olga, Kwok?
On the other hand, won't it be helpful to have a machine learning algorithm? So AI is something that would just crawl through all of the systems and spit out the most
The source of truth. Yeah.
truthful data. I think the word of the year is AI, right, for RevOps and how you use it. And data and analytics is one of the purposes that we can use AI for. But yeah, I totally agree that as RevOps, we serve this as a bridge between executives and various departments and the data, right? So for us to identify, first of all, the set of metrics that we want to track, right? Find this balance between the death by data and too little data, track the right KPIs across different teams, across different functions, I think is important. Also identifying again the sources for those data and for those data points, and then track them consistently historically. Because if you start changing your metrics, your KPIs, your data points that you track, you don't have any historical proof of what's working, what's not. You cannot track trends. Staying consistent, I think, is super important. It's back to the attribution question, right? If you're changing your attribution 4 times a year, it really means nothing. Like, so staying consistent in terms of your definitions and the metrics that you track is important. I just have a very close example from this morning, right? When we're looking into activity metrics from our sales teams, and the activity metrics are showing something is very low. And when I go into our engagement platform, it is actually a different number. So something was pulled out from the wrong platform, was not pulled from the right platform. We need to ensure that we're pulling their calls, their dials, their email sends from the right platform, and ensure that the integration between Salesforce and that platform works. So it is following not just your customer journey, but also your sales process and your salesperson's journey, and ensuring that all the systems are intact and are used properly.
I think Esther mentioned this, but I think of the business and from an analytics perspective in two ways. One is what does the business need to run their business, and then how do we review the business, right? So I think they're quite distinct in the day-to-day and running the business versus review. So I think Olga mentioned like being able to look at things holistically from a review of the business. So I think that's one thing that I would say if you're a less mature kind of sales analytics, like kind of decouple that, because you can look at different metrics from a leading indicator on the review, and then how that tracks into running the business. I think the other aspect is just being very clear in what you're trying to measure from a KPI perspective, and then having that source of truth there. I think there's things that we need to double click to understand the why, but you can't have that across every single dashboard that you have. Kind of just need to know what the actual results are, and then you'll be able to use other tools to understand the why more effectively.
And Nabila, how about yourself? Any thoughts on this topic in terms of an organization less mature in sales analytics?
I mean, I think to me, like, there's a couple themes that are just connecting through. Like, sales process, I think, is probably one massive gap. I mean, like, obviously Forma, we've invested in this, both from a product perspective and how we think about our sales motions. But like, sales process is a massive unlock in terms of being able to collect more data. If you think about how many calls, how many interactions with customers are now recorded, are captured, every email, every message is a data point that we can use to kind of both track compliance against the selling motion, and then use that data to understand what is working and what is not working. So to me, I think there's this opportunity to think about, the art behind sales as something that we can now tap into and see what the best reps are doing on a selling motion by selling motion basis, and actually bring that through RevOps, through sales enablement to the rest of the selling organization. And so I think that's it's a massive unlock from a data collection, data insights for most organizations that again have already started this kind of shift to digitize sales through call recordings and capturing the sales activities at that granularity.
That's a great lead into AI. Olga mentioned that all of the technology being able to draw knowledge from the recordings and transcripts and aggregate it. I mean, there's huge things we can do there from a RevOps perspective to provide clarity into the business.
And I'm reviewing a couple of vendors right now that can actually crawl through structured and unstructured data. So listen to the calls, not just read through the transcripts, but actually listen to the calls and analyze customer sentiment. Was my customer excited to, listen to this demo, right? What was the outcome? It's not like we don't trust sales, right? But we also want to have sort of another point to analyze that. Pipeline entry, pipeline insights, the score deals based on their propensity to close, etc.
A quick follow-up on that, Olga. How close do you think we are to incentivizing on some of that unstructured stuff that you're mentioning, like customer sentiment at the end of a call? Because ultimately that's kind of what we're driving. We want the rep to do, but we probably don't have the measurement tools right now. Or maybe we do. Maybe we're on the cusp of it, which I think is what you're alluding to, right?
So what I'm doing now, like actually working, it's one of the projects. We have this AI app that listens to the calls that are been done by BDR team. Their job is to set meetings, right? For us, the sales process starts when the meeting sort of is set, and that starts the pipeline entry. We don't want to put in a pipeline something that is not qualified. We want to put only qualified meetings into the pipeline. So the old process was to actually capture some fields in Salesforce that a BDR person would fill in, right? And then attach a recording. Now what we're testing is AI actually listens to the call, and then based on the past closed won, closed lost opportunity and qualified pipeline, then identifies if it's qualified to enter the pipeline based on a number of criteria, customer sentiment in one of them, and then a bunch of other things as well. So now we're sort of testing an AI to identify and qualify pipeline entry for us. And to your point about incentivizing or comping, right? BDRs are being comped on meeting set. So it's now in sort of AI hands. Again, we're just testing it out. It's
Right.
like some sort of parallel track, but I feel like give it 2 years and that's going to be the world, right? It's going to fill out all of the fields for us, check all the boxes, put all the transcripts, and put that opportunity into pipeline.
It's a great actually use case, I think, for qualifying top of funnel deals. Like it's a very low risk impact because you can easily build a workflow. I imagine, Olga, like where the
Not
BDRs
according to BDR managers. Not according-
There's always going to be resistance. It's like rolling out any new metric or quota. But the nice thing is you could build a workflow where a BDR could put up their hands and say, no, I do think this is qualified, and they can justify the reasons. And of course, it just goes into training the model. But it's interesting because I think we're kind of going to this world where we have to be like, to unlock a 10x performance improvement, you have to be okay to some extent with a little ambiguity or like a little failure rate in the process. Obviously, some things you can't do that, right? Like when we think about sales comp, it's like you have to be accurate to the penny because it's someone's pay. But on these things that support the upstream sales process, I think there's certainly an ability to kind of build that culture of, hey, this is an ever evolving and moving process that we're working towards, and kind of build the workflow to kind of, again, course correct if we need to.
And think about the time that is being saved for a rep that now it doesn't need to fill out 20 fields after the call, right? The
100%.
system does it for them. So there's a benefit on that. There's a benefit on that as well. Sales time is expensive, so we of course want to optimize and improve the sales time versus the admin time in the system.
Yeah. It's funny because we get the question sometimes like, oh, like, do you ever build incentives into comp plan around Salesforce or CRM compliance? And my pushback is always, this is a futile effort. Like, would you really not compensate a rep, or not pay a top performer if they didn't fill out the CRM? I mean, like, I've seen it firsthand. The best performers can get away with everything, almost. And so this is where, to me, the element of like CRM compliance, we should be making it as easy as possible for the reps to do it, and do so in a way where they see value in it. And if you create value for the reps, right? If you enable workflows or operational like efficiencies for the sellers to be able to better support their customer base by having fields filled in CRM, I think you naturally get better adoption. But in this case, it's even better if you could just automate entirely and have them focus more on selling.
All right, with the looking at the clock, I wanted to move ourselves to the final topic that we were going to talk about today. So this one is centered around enabling a high-performance sales culture. And so, Kwok, I'll start with yourself, but I wanted to ask the group, what is one piece of advice that you could share for a RevOps team looking to establish and create that high-performing sales culture in an organization?
I think for me, you have to know what great looks like. So what is the benchmark in the company? What is a great AE? What do they do? How are they successful? And what are some of the metrics that you can use to compare against kind of other teams? So one of the things that we did, we put a spider chart together. I think it was 13 different metrics that we kind of understood what great looked like, and being able to benchmark what is average, where are you at within that, tying in enablement that was discussed earlier. But like, if you don't know what great looks like and you don't know what makes people successful, it's really hard to make the entire team successful. So that's kind of my one piece of advice.
I 100% agree. Define success, right? Establish clear, measurable, and inspiring goals, and also live in the shoes of your salesperson. Go through the process, right? Understand what they're up against every day, and then try to continuously optimize. It's a never-ending process, right? Continuously optimize your systems to make it easier for them to sell, to track the important points. And for me, it's about over communication, and again, partnering with our enablement team and other teams to over communicate the changes and to stay close to the sales teams.
Yeah, I think to add to those comments, I think, one of the things that I found really beneficial is, similar to having the playbooks, that we're not just focusing on the lagging indicators in terms of what does success look like? Talking about the best reps, what are they doing? Like, one of the top reps that I worked with at my previous company, he was the guy that would sit there and religiously prospect every single week. And he was winning these multi-million-dollar deals, but yet he was still doing the basics really well. So it's those activities and behaviors that are leading indicators that, it's not about just about close won deals. It's also about like, what are the behaviors that people are doing? And if you can shine a light on that and help people kind of orient themselves towards the successful behaviors of the top performers, I think that really helps a lot. And so we would break it down by segment, showing here's the things that you would do on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis to get to that success. I think that's really helpful to focus on the behaviors of how to get there. Because I think sometimes, especially newer reps, look at the successful rep and they're like, how the heck do I get there? I want to be like them, right? But how did they do it? So I think kind of breaking it that way can be helpful.
And when you guys are raising these points of, defining what the best looks like, or saying, you mentioning put yourself in their shoes, how do you actually do this in practice? Are you guys surveying them? Are you interviewing them? How much of it is you sitting with a bunch of data and saying, well, I know they said this, but let's try and figure out with the data, what does good look like? What does it look like in practice?
Yeah, so I think one, it is definitely pulling the data. So for us, we would have metrics on even just activity that they're doing within the sales tools. And then how does that correlate to the end results? And we could see that the top performers had a lot higher activity levels in things like LinkedIn Navigator or other tools that then lead to creating more contacts, creating more sales-led opportunities, things like that. But I think also one thing that was really successful was interviewing the reps and hearing about their kind of, how do they plan their day? How do they plan their week? And we would incorporate those tips and share some of the names even. And there are, certain reps in the company. And so when you have their names associated with it, like so-and-so says, this is how you do it, they're really paying attention and absorbing that lesson, right?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, David, what I like is the rep scorecard, so that managers can use that as far as performance management, but also having benchmarks against what's average across the company, what's a low performer, what's a high performer, and then where certain individuals sit within that kind of sphere. I think that's one. I think the other aspect that Esther just mentioned is what does a day in the life look like, and working with enablement and how we onboard new reps is super important. So if we know that good reps prospect between Mondays through Thursdays, they update systems during these periods. These are the reports and dashboards they use. Incorporating all of that into enablement is super helpful as well.
Great. Well, thanks for all that great discussion, everyone. So I think now we want to use the final. I think we have around 12 minutes left, and there's been some interesting questions that have come in through the chat, and I wanted to put it to yourselves. And this is a free for all. Anyone can answer these, but maybe I'll pick up on one. There was one on ChatGPT, and then another one around other new AI innovative tools that RevOps might be using. I think, Olga, you jumped in. Maybe you can also speak to your answer on that one in terms of what AI RevOps tools should we know about next year?
Well, the biggest one's going to be, of course, Salesforce, right? They just launched their Agent Force. We did the demo. For me, at least for Birdeye, the more use cases lie on the post-sales side, trying to still figure out if it's possible to use as it stands right now for the new business. Can't find sort of any use case that would make sense based on our pain points, but I'm looking at an app called Epic Brief, for example. That's the unstructured data analyzer. It also analyzes all the account insights. It reads through your structured and unstructured data and can qualify your pipeline entry, scores, calls, etc. That is interesting. We also recently invested in an app called Inven. They do account sourcing. So part of our RevOps responsibilities is territory planning and account management, of course. So we do source and create accounts for our sellers, along with ZoomInfo and other data sources. Now we have this Invent. That's an AI app. It plugs into everything. You can just like type in your ICP and it spits out the accounts for you. It suppresses your existing Salesforce database or CRM database and sort of generates new accounts for you, which is pretty cool. And then of course we're using AI functionalities from ZoomInfo itself, from LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Pretty much every app has AI now. ChatGPT is super helpful for account insights. Sales rep types in, "Hey, I'm meeting customer X. What should I talk to them about?" Right, and then it can pull up this person's LinkedIn post or this person's whatever recent career path, et cetera, et cetera. So it just helps with a lot of account insights, meeting preps, and all of that.
Great. Another question that came in. So what role does personalization play in designing effective sales incentives? Anyone have thoughts, Kwok?
Is that personalization on the components or by role? I think honestly, I think quotas is probably the most personalized thing for a sales rep that we can get to. I don't know if components of the comp plan can be personalized to each individual. It's more likely the role. So maybe a little bit more detail on what personalized means to the question.
I think one thing I've seen, and it's not been rolled out a huge amount, but in terms of picking your own plan as an example, right? Giving a sales rep option. So to your point, maybe more towards the components. You can pick your component. Not sure if anyone's seen that in their experience, but
I've not
It's
seen it so personalized, but
I mean, it's interesting because like it's so personalization of incentives. I think your point, Pog, is very valid. Like quotas, 100%. Territories and quotas go hand in hand. They should be tailored to that the coverage that we're expecting that rep to have. I think on the incentives themselves, the one way to think about it is like we talked about trigger-based spiffs as an example, where you're a little bit behind quota against your run rate. We need to kind of push you to either get past the hurdle rate or we risk you not achieving targets. And you kind of have a trigger-based spiff that rolls out. I mean, the moment you have kind of workflows that are automating these types of incentive rollouts, then in theory, you are tailoring and personalizing incentives. And then I think for some industries more than others, and this may be a little bit less so for standardized like tech role, like sales roles like AEs or BDR, but kind of the choose your own adventure or like pick your own plan works very well in industries where you can have a lot of flexibility for base. So you could say I want to have more leverage on my plan to less leverage, and so you're effectively playing around with that, and we've seen that work well in some industries. But
I have not seen personalization, but I have dealt with, for example, reps that work with large accounts, whale accounts. And of course, the plan is going to be very different for them. And maybe you only have very limited number of reps, 2-3 reps. And that could be considered personalization. They would have a completely different structure, just due to the nature of the business that they deal with. But other than that, I'm all for standardizing, you guys. And RevOps has to be standard across the globe.
I think that's a good one. I just thought of it now when I brought it up, but MBOs are basically customized comp plans, right? So if you have a MBO plan, that would be customized on the specific person, but definitely not a scalable thing that we want to roll across, 200 AEs.
Another interesting one that came in. So it's when it comes to sales marketing alignment, how should I be thinking about shared metrics between teams where they are both accountable? Anyone with any thoughts?
Missed the first part of your question. Shared metrics between whom?
Sales and marketing.
Well, so I think that one's super important. I've seen big misses in alignment when you don't have the same goals for the sales and marketing team, especially in kind of the old world where marketing might have been more focused on the lead side of things and sales cares more about opportunities. So I think having more alignment on the actual goals, and I think having marketing more focused on qualified opportunities as the most important metric from a demand gen standpoint, I think is important. I remember having a conversation with someone in demand gen around ABM and how we were allocating our spend, and his plan did not account for progressing current opportunities. Well, that's a big miss because those are actually better. Spend is going to have a better payoff allocated to opportunities that are in progress than it will for trying to create a brand new opportunity. So things like that, I think you need to make sure that you don't have disparities, because it can really create a problem in terms of the alignment and people pushing towards the same goals.
I do think there is an evolution on the marketing side as well, where it isn't purely top of the funnel. There is a component of deal acceleration to that, and like the attribution, and not just sourced pipeline, but also what we can do to influence the acceleration of pipeline. So I think there is a component of just getting alignment on what people want to do. But I think marketing also has this kind of new motion around ABM and customer marketing, where we're working on how do we expand our existing base through marketing, not just creating new customers. So there's a lot of partnership now going on with the marketing and sales side, just to even identify accounts and look at customer marketing and nurturing.
Yeah, this is where we bridge the gap again. I would say, what is a meeting? What is an MQL? What is a SAL, right? Relying on the definitions and the source of truth for those definitions. And, that's how you ensure that the data points are aligned and the board meetings and the LT meetings don't turn into drama.
incentive alignment, that is at the heart of a lot of problems or incentive
100%.
misalignment. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, alignment on the incentives. I don't want BDRs to be only aligned on meetings when my reps are aligned just on the ACV and they have misaligned goals. And then you can never, like, compensation drives behavior.
Great. Okay. Well, we're coming to the top of the hour. I think that's a great place to end the conversation. Thank you so much, Esther, Olga, Kwok, and Nabil for joining today. I think there was a lot of great information, and hopefully everyone enjoyed that in the chat. And again, as Mike mentioned, we have future panels like this upcoming in the next couple of months. And so hope to see everyone at those as well. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.